Hello, BookTube. If you are laser focused on this BookTube channel, as well you should be, you might sometimes forget that I am on other social media. I don't have any social presence on Facebook. After a while, I simply gave up on it and went through the maddeningly labyrinthine process of deleting my account. Facebook does not make that easy, and it's up to them whether or not they want to do it at all, so you have to be nice. But aside from that, I am on Twitter. In 2024, I am mostly using Twitter to, as the kids say, signal boost my written book reviews for Open Letters Review. I occasionally will comment on something else over there, but I'm finding it more enjoyable, more satisfying to use Twitter for bookish reasons than for anything else. I spent a large amount of 2023 venting political frustrations on Twitter. Then I realized that's not so enjoyable to do when the site has been bought and is now being run by an inept Marvel supervillain. That's what it's for. Twitter has now become a crap-posting venue, and that made it feel like boring conformity to crap post all day long on Twitter. So I've been finding it more enjoyable to just keep Twitter literary, bookish. And I also have a presence on Goodreads, which has been very spotty up until 2024. In 2024, I've tried to be very good, at least about the bare minimum of, again, signal boosting my written reviews. I haven't done more than that, and I want to. I figure I'll do it by baby steps since I've neglected Goodreads for so long. I've started with just signal boosting the reviews. The two other things I want to do are write original content for Goodreads that isn't 800 words long for a lot of other stuff, a lot of books, especially indie published books, where 200 words written at speed because I just read your book, and maybe I'm not going to give it, the full deep dive into your author history, but I still want to put something out there. That could mean a lot to an indie author, or even a mainstream author of a book that isn't getting much notice. I mean to do that. I mean to add that to the signal boosting. And then the third thing I want to do on Goodreads is more of the social stuff. Are there groups I could join? Group discussion boards that I could be part of. I don't even know how to explore in that, but I am intending on doing it, and I have made a start. I have made a start in January so far by signal boosting my reviews. And I'm also on Instagram, and I really like Instagram. I do. Instagram is where I post a lot of pictures of my little baby Bean, who is always near me. She's always with me. I also post pictures of when she's not near me, when I go out and about. I haven't done that lately because it's been freezing cold here. But I post pictures there. I also post pictures of books on Instagram. Not as often as I should. Oh, God, I hear that in emails and in Voxer. I guess Voxer is also a social media app. It's just it's by invitation. It's so isolinear that it doesn't feel that way. There's no general participation in Voxer, but I am on Voxer. You are welcome to leave me a message. In emails and on Voxer, I have heard from many people over the years that they would like it if I increased my bookish representation on Instagram, that if I did more bookish content there, showed more books, maybe quickly raised a question about more books or whatnot. I should do that. There's always more to talk about. But the other day on Instagram, I made a post showing 2 volumes of a work, and it got a huge amount of response in email and on Voxer, a huge amount of response from people who, years ago, I championed these particular books, and I think Mark Richardson at the time did as well, offhandedly. We weren't making any kind of an iconoclastic point about it. We were just saying, people often write these things off as merely textbooks, and there's a lot more heart and soul to them than that. You shouldn't write them off. There's a lot more to them than just something that you were assigned in school. I thought nothing of such an assertion years ago when we and I were both saying it, and I didn't think anything of it. I just let it drop, and then I posted a picture on Instagram of this. This is the 4th edition of the Norton Anthology of English Literature. There's Volume 1 and Volume 2. Ain't Queen Elizabeth and a Turner picture. Big, thick things with onion skin pages, very thin onion skin pages, so that in a representative volume, this is what, 1,600 pages long? 2,500 pages long for Volume 1, and you are 2,582 pages. So these are big volumes, but they don't get absolutely enormous because of the onion skin paper. It's very, very thin paper that's used here. I posted both. I've been absolutely enraptured by volume 1 of this 2-volume set lately. It has been beguiling way too much time that should be devoted to new releases. Instead, I've just been loving exploring the 4th edition of the Norton Anthology of English Literature for the reasons that Mark and I said years ago, which is that you're going to be assigned these things in school, maybe. The latest Norton Anthology you might be assigned in school, and you will associate it with being assigned and with school and with deadlines and whatnot. But there's a huge amount of scholarship and heart and soul that go into these volumes. They are well worth, very enjoyable to read on their own, quite apart from any school assignment. And I recently got a couple of years ago. When was this? A couple of years ago, I found these 2 volumes with dust jackets at the Brattle Bookshop, and I've had them many, many times. I've taught from them many times. I've also been taught from them many, many times. And I love them for that reason, so I found both of these and got them, and I've been spending a lot of time in volume 1 and really enjoying it. And I posted a picture on Instagram of these 2 and said that I was actually tempted to do a massive read-through, just a read-along of these things on YouTube, on this channel. And that's what provoked the enormous response. A gigantic response from people saying, I'm on board, I'll do it, please sign me up. I have those volumes, or something like them. The 4th volume was eventually coalesced into a finished product around 1980. And then there was a 5th edition and a 6th edition, a 7th edition. I think the Nortons are well into the double digits by now. There's a danger in which edition you have, depending on how old you are, because you don't want an edition of the Norton Anthology of English Literature that was made any later than, I would say, the late 1990s. Certainly not into the 21st century. In the 21st century, all literary anthologies, unfortunately, including the flagship of them all, the Norton Anthology, have been completely ideologically captured. They all now promote a nonsensical idea, an idea that does not exist, that there is an alternate canon. That the fact that you are reading a canon of authors who are almost all white men is a product of racism and institutional bigotry, and that there's actually a completely functional, gigantic, abundant literary canon that isn't that. That is not true. That is false. That is factually false. There is no alternate canon. It doesn't matter. If you are an ideological zealot, you are going to build a literary anthology around that false idea anyway, and that's what all literary anthologies currently do. Which means that the later on you go with Norton anthologies, the less good, the less valuable they are. Unfortunately, it's kind of a tightrope that you have to walk, because the earliest Norton anthologies, and I'm not picking on Norton here, any literary anthology, the earliest literary anthologies entirely ignore women. They entirely ignore them. And that is just as false as the so-called alternate canon of the 21st century. So you have to walk a fine line there. It's the same thing with poetry anthologies. You have to pick an edition of the Norton Anthology of English Literature that is late enough so that people are aware, so that there is a kind of parody involved here. It's still not going to be exact, because in almost all cultures and almost all countries and almost all time periods covered by these anthologies up until the relatively modern era, women were bought and sold as chattel animals. They were not educated. They certainly could not write. They faced physical violence if they did so. So it's going to be slim pickings. But there are pickings out there. If you were to go to the very earliest Norton literary anthologies of any kind, they might ignore, for instance, Mary Sidney. They shouldn't. But they might. They might ignore Aphra Behn. They might mention her but not show you any of her work. They might do that. They won't be able to do it once they get to the relatively modern era. No anthology like this can ignore Jane Austen, right, or the Brontes, or Virginia Woolf. You can't do it once you get a little bit closer to our age. So it's a little bit of a fine walk. You're pretty much safe if you're in the 80s. This is about as late as I would want to go with the Norton Anthology of English Literature. And I posted these two, and I said, I'm halfway tempted to just walk our way through these anthologies, avoiding the pitfall that I have been forced to do when I've used these to teach from them, and also that other teachers have been forced to fall into when they use them on me, which is picking and choosing. That instead we wouldn't pick and choose. We would just go through the whole thing. And one of the reasons why the idea appealed to me is because, unlike any other literary anthology, this would very quickly get us away from the necessity of spending time talking about the vagaries of translation. It's a necessary element in the Norton Anthology of Classical Literature or anything like that, the Norton Anthology of Continental Literature. It becomes a necessary element. Most of my listeners understand English and are often native English speakers. In the first volume of the Norton Anthology of English Literature, you are dealing with a translation of Beowulf into modern English. But in the fourth edition, you've got Beowulf and Malden and the Battle of Malden and whatnot. But immediately after that, the very next big thing in this anthology is Chaucer, and he's given in the original. He's given in his original. He's not Englished in Neville Coghill or anything like that. It's not modernized. So that would mean that if we were to walk our way through this book in almost no time at all, we would not be talking about translation. It wouldn't even be an element. Instead, we would just be reading the vast body of English literature. And I proposed that, and it got a lot of response, and it's still getting a lot of response, and it made me think about it. It made me think about what to do. Should we do that? Not to imply that this channel is a democracy. It's, of course, a ruthless autocracy. But should we do that? Should that be? I've mentioned at the beginning of this year, I mentioned that I want to do a whole bunch of interactive reading involvement, interactive reading projects. I want to do a read aloud, where I read a book out loud to you. I haphazardly centered on the King James Bible, the New Testament, for that. And I intend to do that. I'm having a blast. And a lot of you are too. So we're going to do the Gospel according to St. Mark, then Matthew, then Luke and Acts, then John. So we're going to do the whole wad of the New Testament. I'm not going to do the epistles. I'm not going to do Revelation. But I'm going to do the whole of that story, just reading it aloud to you and commenting on it. I like to do more read-alouds as the year goes on. And there'll be a kind of a read-along in that in February we revive the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club, so that you will all be vulnerable to monthly STDs. So that every month we will read something. February we're reading Antonia Fraser's biography of Marie Antoinette. But that still leaves lots of room for other things. Lots and lots of other interactive type read-alongs. I love to do. A lot of you love to do them too. I don't know. I have my reservations because this is a huge undertaking. To do even one of these volumes is a huge undertaking. To do two of them would take us the rest of the year. No matter what kind of schedule I set. It would be a lot of fun because this is more than anything else the literary tradition that has shaped your literary world. If you are an English language speaker, a native English language speaker, an English language world, that sort of thing. If you're that kind of viewer, which I don't know how to look at my metrics on YouTube, but I'm assuming that's 99% of the people who watch this channel. If so, that has shaped a huge amount of your literary world, whether you know it or not. On the one hand, that's a plus in the plus column. Another is that this wouldn't necessarily be asking a lot of you in terms of material layout. A lot of you have a version of the Norton Anthology of English Literature just sitting at home. A lot of you already have this volume. You got it at school. You haven't had the heart to get rid of it. And I would imagine, I haven't checked. I maybe should have before this video, but I haven't made up my mind. That's why I didn't check. I would imagine that the broader reading world thinks of these things the way a lot of people in our community do, as basically worthless, that this is a school book. Which means, if that's true, that you could find these things fairly cheaply online, on Amazon or eBay or wherever you go for a book finder or whatever. So you wouldn't be out a lot of money to find these things. The major problem with buying from an online vendor is that they lie. They all lie. And that ordinarily wouldn't matter if you were buying a copy of, Shogun or something like that. But these things, they were sent into schools by their hundreds of thousands, which means you have to be careful or you will get something that is full of obnoxious neon highlighting. And that is a deal breaker for a lot of readers. I can't read past that. I can't concentrate past that. I can concentrate past bad underlining. But the blocks of neon highlighting, that ruins it for me. So when I find something like this that I know has been used in schools, I have to carefully thumb through it to see that it's clean. And you won't be able to do that online. If you buy something from an eBay vendor, they're going to lie about that. They're going to say may contain highlighting. And if you, in a circumstance like that, you might want to email the seller and say, well, you're selling this to me. You're saying you're copy and pasting the language of the seller's Bible for eBay. You're saying it may contain highlighting. I'm not interested in may. The physical thing that you have in your possession that you're selling to me, does it have highlighting or does it not? And if the seller writes back and says, it's not in my location, I'm selling these things from a warehouse, then find somebody else. You have to be, the seller has to be able to tell you in an email that you can reproduce to eBay, no, there is no highlighting in this item. You have to be able to reproduce that with its timestamp to eBay. So that if you get the volume and it's covered in highlighting, so in other words, they're revealed as just a black-faced liar, well, you can call them on it and get your money back, or get a volume that isn't highlighted. It's a nightmare. But it might be an avoidable nightmare. I don't know. I don't know. I'm still of two minds on the subject of whether or not to make this a big project for this channel. So I thought I would throw it out to you. Not because this is a democracy, but considering how many of you boss me around in your emails, that's kind of a strained joke anyway. But to see what you think of it. What you think of it. The one other question that I had about doing this, the one other concern I have, involves something that maybe I don't have to worry about on this channel. We've developed a kind of a good rapport. I think a lot of you understand where, to use patois from the 60s, where I'm coming from. The concern would be didacticism. It would be pedagogy, which I hate. I hate formal classrooms. I hate the disparity of power. I hate I'm going to sit back here, I'm going to clear my throat, you're going to poise your pens and pencils or your fingers over your iPad to take note, and then I'm just going to tell you what you should think about all this stuff. I hate that. I always rebelled against that whenever I did any teaching myself. And I wonder if this wouldn't just lend itself to that. It wouldn't just be some sort of specter right at the side of the elbow all the time if we were to do this. This would very much not be me teaching this book. It would very much not be that. I think a lot of you know that, just from the way that we deal with canonical literature on this channel, the way we've done it for years. Occasionally, I will get a comment. Occasionally, someone will show up in a video that's about a canonical work, clearly wanting me to teach. I don't. 90% of the teaching that I've seen of literature, the prerequisite is that the receiver turn their brains off. I don't want that at all. This is your patrimony, the same as it's mine. That'd be my other worry, and maybe that's not a worry that I need to worry about, because on this channel we seem to have sidestepped that completely. God help us if this channel were twice the size. There'd be no way to avoid it. Look at larger booktube channels here. I won't pick on Jack Edwards, especially since no one's heard from him in a month, and I won't pick on Benjamin McAvoy either. I would just picture a bigger booktube channel that is in the business of teaching a book or a work of literature. Just picture in your mind how insufferable they are. I don't want to be that. I don't want to even come close to that line. And there have occasionally been comments on videos of mine when I'm dealing with canonical literature in any way from commentators that clearly wanted me to be that way. Can you recommend not just what I should read, but how I should read it? Yeah. I wouldn't want even the suspicion of that, but I don't think many of you would suspect me of that. I think most of you, the ones who watch my videos, I get the sense that you understand that I think all of this is just a conversation. My approach to this and all things bookish is extremely Erasmian. I am not meaning to teach. I am meaning to talk. I think we probably get that. So that worry I probably don't have to worry about. So that leaves only two worries, which is what do we want to do it? Is it too big a thing? And is it too big a practical hurdle for you to get this and get the right kind of this? I mean, we don't all have to be from the exact same edition, but later editions are unrecognizable. Later editions of any literary anthology, not just the Norton Anthology, but any literary anthology, they're unrecognizable. They are hauling in... They are very much in service to the completely false idea of an alternate canon. You definitely wouldn't, if you had such a volume, and I was reading from this one, we'd barely be touching it anyway. They probably have only one small selection from Chaucer, for instance. Do they have Beowulf at all? I don't know. Maybe if they have Beowulf, they probably have one of the new feminist blue-haired translations of Beowulf where Grendel's mother, I don't know, is in favor of the EPA or something like that, or she's doing sit-ins with her local congressman or something like that. She's another monster. I don't know. I don't know how we do. I also the later anthologies, literary anthologies, tend to give you I don't know, 2 or 3 Hamlets or something like that instead of pick a Hamlet, pick a textual translation, a textual tradition, and stick with it. They become a kind of multicultural relativistic nightmare. Later on they go, and some of you might be young enough so that would be the Norton Anthology you would be using if we did this. But I imagine those are hurdles that we could get over. I'm mainly wondering, is this too big to do? For us to take a Steve Donoghue booktube tour through all of English literature. And of course we would stop. I have a feeling that we would stop after the end of Volume 2. Where, let's just check and see. Okay, the end of Volume 2 here ends with contemporary poetry from the likes of Seamus Heaney, John Silkin, Donald Davie, Philip Larkin. It ends, there's, I think, a Harold Pinter play that ends here. So this ends basically in the middle of the 20th century. If we were to do this, then sometime next winter, when we run out of Norton Anthology 4th edition to do, maybe then we could talk about a subject that's come up on this channel many times, which is to hash out and then discuss a canon for the second half of the 20th century, which books don't do. No one's got that far, so people don't do it. But I have done it. I know perfectly well what that canon is. Wouldn't that be fun to do poetry, drama, and fiction, staying away from nonfiction, and do a canon for the second half of the 20th century, leading right to the doorstep of our new millennium? Wouldn't that be something to finish out this whole thing with? But I don't know what would we call it? How would we do it? I don't know. I thought I would put it up to you. There are plenty of first-class minds out there listening to me, plus also Wilson. So some of you might be able to have ideas on the subject, and maybe that'll get me thinking on it. So I thought I'd put it out there on a bitterly cold, bright Sunday. So I'll wrap this up for now. What do you think? All of English literature? Oh my. What do you think? Let me know. Thank you, BookTube.